Well, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about hyperpigmentation. Specifically, we're going to be getting into a deep dive on arbutin, an ingredient I'm sure many of you have come across in your search for skin lightening products aimed at fading dark marks. First of all, before we get into it, you need to have some bit of understanding of why it is our skin makes these dark marks to begin with. Dark marks, hyperpigmentation, originates with a little cell called the melanocyte, which is the cell in your skin tasked with, well, making the pigment melanin. These pigment producing cells live in your epidermis. Your epidermis is the top part of your skin. And when you're imagining your epidermis, just think of it as a multi-storied building. Melanocytes, they live in the basement. They make the pigment melanin, they put it together in these little packets, and then they send it up to different levels of the epidermis. There are a lot of different factors that can stimulate those little pigment cells to make melanin pigment. First of all, ultraviolet radiation from the sun, right? Sun exposure is a major driving force for skin darkening. Not only ultraviolet radiation from the sun though, but visible light as well. Visible light is the light that we see with our eyes. You don't see ultraviolet radiation, but you do see visible light, and both of those play a role in hyperpigmentation. You also have hormonal influences, namely the female hormones. That's why hyperpigmentation can become more of an issue during pregnancy, especially with the condition melasma, as well as with certain hormonal birth control pills. Then we cannot ignore the role of inflammation in the skin when it comes to hyperpigmentation. As a matter of fact, that is what underlies a specific type of hyperpigmentation called post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. And what that is basically anytime there is inflammation in your skin. Think of like acne or a bug bite or a rash, scratching, irritation and inflammation, they bring about all of these different inflammatory mediators, and the melanocyte cell responds to that by making more pigment. Likewise, when we go about our day and we're exposed to environmental aggressors, they generate something called reactive oxygen species, which our skin is tasked with handling via antioxidants, but sometimes that overwhelms things. And a downstream consequence of that is that that pigment producing cell, the melanocyte, goes, oh, hey, let's make more pigment. So remember, I told you that those pigment producing cells, they make the pigment in response to a lot of these different stimuli, and they put it together in these little packets called melanosomes. They send it up through the epidermis. But sometimes there is so much inflammation that it damages the basement. And that pigment, the melanin pigment, it drops down into the deeper layers of the skin. It's not going up, it's going down. And that's important to understand, because once it's dropped down, what happens is cells in your immune system called macrophages, these are professional eating cells, think of Pac-Man, they come in and they engulf that pigment and they hang out there. The pigment is sitting there in the deeper layers. And what that translates to when you look at your skin with your eye is you have this discoloration, this darkening of the skin, but it's not light brown or tan or beige. It's more of a deep, darkish, almost blue to gray in appearance, all related to where it's located in the skin. That's important because when we are going through the drugstore, the skincare aisles, choosing products to address hyperpigmentation, they're not going to tackle those melanophages down in the dermis. Everything is going to be tackling stuff up top, including arbutin. I promise we're going to get to arbutin, but you really need a lot of backstory in order to really make an informed decision as to if arbutin is going to be worth it for you or not. Let's talk about the go-to treatment for hyperpigmentation disorders, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, melasma. The topical medication most well studied, and that is, kind of a first-line gold standard treatment, it's hydroquinone. Now, hydroquinone is something you apply to the skin. It can be used by itself, but it's often prescribed as a cream that's combined with some other active ingredients, namely tretinoin, as well as a steroid for anti-inflammatory effects. Now, what hydroquinone does for fading dark spots, it inhibits the enzyme tyrosinase. That enzyme is what the melanocytes, the pigment-producing cells that live in the basement, that's what they use to make pigment. So it inhibits that. It also mucks up the melanosomes. Those are those little packages of pigment that the melanosomes are putting together. kind of like they make lunch. And hydroquinone is also toxic to melanocytes. It causes them to die. So for that reason, you know, it's a medication, it's a drug. And for patients on this, they need to be monitored by their dermatologist to make sure they're getting appropriate response and that they're not developing too much irritation, because as you can imagine, this can be a pretty irritating topical medication. And again, bringing it full circle, anything that's irritating to the skin, causes too much inflammation, can aggravate hyperpigmentation, because remember, those melanocytes, they respond to that inflammation by making more pigment. It's not something that you can just be on every single day from here on out. And with hydroquinone, there is a risk of rebound worsening hyperpigmentation because the neighboring healthy skin, you know, it's going to start affecting that, and that can result in the skin having this compensatory response to try and make more pigment. So it's really something that needs to be used in a very controlled fashion. Herein comes arbutin. You're like, finally. Finally, arbutin is a compound that comes from plants naturally, although it can be made synthetically. Arbutin is a compound that if you look at its structure, it's basically hydroquinone plus a sugar, D-glucose, stuck together. And in contrast to hydroquinone, it's, first of all, much less irritating. So it's safer for you to use per se without doctor supervision. Although again, anything can be irritating to the skin, so you still have to be mindful of that. But what it does is it's thought to work a little bit differently in comparison to straight up hydroquinone. Yes, it inhibits tyrosinase, but no, it doesn't destroy the little melanosome packages. It kind of gets in there and slows down the assembly line of packaging up the pigment into those little melanosomes. In contrast to hydroquinone, it's not toxic to melanocytes. It doesn't cause melanocyte death. Now, the other thing about arbutin is that it's an antioxidant. Anything that causes inflammation, reactive oxygen species, oxidative stress, it's going to drive more hyperpigmentation. The benefit of arbutin is that it may offset some of that. Arbutin is something that you will encounter in a lot of skincare products. It appears to be safe with long-term use. It does not appear to be as irritating as hydroquinone. So again, less risky in comparison to you just self-treating with hydroquinone, which I don't recommend doing. Where arbutin really seems to shine though is when it is combined alongside other gentle skin lightening ingredients like licorice root, which is anti-inflammatory and also has some role in inhibiting tyrosinase, along with kojic acid, a compound derived from fungus that gets in the way of how tyrosinase works as well. All of these cosmetic ingredients, they work slightly differently to tackle pigment, hyperpigmentation, and together they really exhibit synergy. So you frequently will encounter products that are more than just arbutin. They have a few of these other players, and make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm going to be talking about one of my favorites that I personally use. Arbutin can improve the appearance of hyperpigmentation, dark spots, again, in the topmost layers of the skin. It's not going to get rid of that deeper dermal component, the bluish slate gray discoloration. And it may also help lessen inflammation in the skin via its anti-inflammatory properties. So it may help your skin out to be less overzealous, if you will, when it comes to how your skin reacts to sunlight. That being said, it's paramount, as with anything that you are using to lighten dark spots, that you are super aggressive with your sun protection, because no skin lightening ingredient is going to offset completely the impact of unprotected sun exposure. So you really need to be doing the sunscreen, of course, sun protective clothing. You can appreciate some improvement potentially in post-acne marks. Now, some people's acne, it's going to heal with a dark mark more on the top layers of the skin. But again, if you had cystic acne, the cysts and stuff, that inflammation is down deep in the skin. It can really be quite damaging to the basement membrane, leading to that pigment drop down in the deeper layers. So that slatish, bluish, grayish discoloration, this is not going to necessarily clear that out. What are the limitations of arbutin though? I would say, you know, I'm not a cosmetic chemist, but my understanding when it comes to arbutin is that formulation. The formulation of the product is very, very important. It is a cosmetic ingredient. So we don't really have good objective studies out there to really say for sure, oh yes, this is a well-formulated arbutin product. The arbutin is stable in this. It's in a delivery system that actually gets into the skin. I mean, there's a lot that goes behind the scenes of creating an effective formula. A lot of brands, for example, may encapsulate their arbutin to ensure that it remains stable and that it actually gets into the skin. Arbutin in cosmetics, it is safe. We don't really have any evidence that it is causing harm to people. However, there is theoretical risk involved with Arbutin. It's hydroquinone plus a sugar. So depending on the formulation, the storage conditions, in theory, it could degrade to hydroquinone. Probably going to be very traced to low amounts of hydroquinone in the formula. The other safety concern with Arbutin is that some research actually suggests that at higher concentrations, that Arbutin can actually lead to paradoxical hyperpigmentation. But it is something that has been shown in small studies in kind of a limited fashion. So it does raise some concern. That being said, I've never seen anyone develop paradoxical hyperpigmentation from using a skincare product with Arbutin. Keeping that in mind, I suggest you pay attention to the ingredients of the products that you are using and that you don't stack multiple products with Arbutin. Just stick to one product that has Arbutin in it rather than, multiple. What you will find is you're not gonna know what the percentage in the formula is. So that's a big unknown. It's hard to know. Brands don't typically always reveal that. And if you'll recall back to my myth busting video on formulation, even though I'm not a skincare formulator, but a myth is the assumption that a higher percentage is necessarily going to be better, or that lower percentages are not effective. Again, it boils down to the formulation, the delivery systems. Lower percentages may actually be, much better. Lower risk of side effects, better delivery. Who knows? Who knows? These are things that really haven't been worked out. How do you use Arbutin in your routine? You can apply it twice a day. Apply it to the skin after cleansing, to clean skin. You can apply it to the skin while it's still a bit damp if you want to in theory enhance penetration of it. It's generally well tolerated, but if you find that it burns, it stings, it's irritating, back off, and instead of applying it to the skin while it's damp, let your skin dry. Because when the skin is damp, you get more penetration, can be more irritating. Make sure though that you are aggressive with your sun protection. This is like getting a bunch of ketchup packets and you've got no fries, okay? You need the sun protection, otherwise it's just weird and a waste. So let's talk about a product that I personally use, and I've used a lot this year. In fact, it was one of my most repurchased. It's the Maeda K Fadeaway Brightening Serum. This product I found personally for me to be very effective for brightening up my skin tone and lightening some dark spots, hyperpigmentation. And what I like about this is that it's Arbutin and it's also kojic acid and it's also licorice root. So those three are very gentle pigment lightening ingredients to brighten and improve skin tone. And they, tackle slightly different aspects of the pigment producing machinery in a slightly different way, so they exhibit synergy. The formula overall is also very hydrating and moisturizing, and I've got news for you. When it comes to improving the appearance of hyperpigmentation, there's something to be said for moisturizing, because improving the moisture content of the topmost layers of the skin ultimately, through light scattering, helps dark spots appear less noticeable. For example, if you have dark spots on your skin, hyperpigmentation, it's a lot more obvious, right, if your skin's dry. Moisturizing can just, by light scattering, help that. And moisturizing also improves barrier function, cutting down on the potential for you to develop irritation that would ultimately worsen hyperpigmentation. So it's a very hydrating serum. I apply it, I actually usually only apply it once a day, although Arbutin can be used twice a day. And I, of course, am really aggressive with my sun protection. And when I use this product, I definitely do note an improvement in skin luminosity, skin tone. I've paused using it at various times throughout the year to try other antioxidant serums, other products to test out for you guys. So I've definitely taken long breaks from it. So it's not even something that I use, I'll use an entire bottle and then I'll repurchase it, but I won't necessarily jump right back into using it. I'll test out something else. And the results that I get with it, the improvement in skin tone, they're maintained. Now, one final note, when it comes to what we call post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, meaning you've got a skin problem going on and it heals with a dark mark, the most pressing thing should be getting that primary inflammatory thing under control. Whether it be acne, eczema, a contact dermatitis, those things need to be controlled. You can't correct the hyperpigmentation so long as the inflammatory response is going on. You know, it's kind of like trying to put out a fire with your foot and then somebody's pouring more gasoline on the fire. Like, you're going to get burned. So make sure that that's under control. And I'm telling you that because, you know, a lot of people might pursue something like this, trying to fade their eczema hyperpigmentation, but their eczema is still flaring and it's not controlled. Controlling the inflammatory condition is key. That being said, it's not to say that you can't use these things, but you know, that's really where your efforts should be focused, is controlling the initial event, because the longer that goes on uncontrolled, the more stubborn the hyperpigmentation is going to become. It's going to become an issue where, especially if it's a very inflammatory issue like cystic acne, where you really will start to go more towards getting that dermal component as the basement membrane gets damaged and the pigment leaks down in there, and then those macrophages come in and engulf that. All right, y'all, that's what I wanted to talk about for today's video, all about Arbutin. Hopefully this was informative, helps you make a decision for yourself if you were eyeing different skin lightening, pigment correcting type products. Now, I have a lot of videos on this channel about different ingredients for hyperpigmentation, and I'm going to put one of my most recent videos on this topic on the end slide, so definitely check that one out next if you are dealing with any type of hyperpigmentation. But I really hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.